Hey everybody, before we start the show, I wanted to let you know that this episode of Tabletop Babble is brought to you by D&D Beyond, the official digital toolset of Dungeons and Dragons. Now listen, I spend a lot of time talking about D&D Beyond on this podcast, and I've often talked about many of their incredible free features like articles from James J. Haeck, videos from Todd Kenrick, and so much more. But now I want to talk to you about the paid stuff. Real talk. I do a lot of D&D designing, okay? I do it for the DMs Guild. I do it for Wizards of the Coast. I do it for myself. I've done it for the Demon Plague. I do it for my blog. I do it all over the place. And D&D Beyond is a huge help. I can look stuff up immediately. If you are a designer, a dungeon master, a player who loves creating characters, you got to check out D&D Beyond. It is super, super helpful. It is a great tool. It's going to change the way you do things. I know it's changed things for me. So go check it out at dndbeyond.com. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I have two incredible game designer guests. I am talking with Alex Klippinger and the one and only James J. Haeck. We're talking about Dragon Heist. That's right, the adventure Dragon Heist. How can you remix it? How can you make it more replayable? We do a lot of delving into this modular adventure from Wizards of the Coast. You may have already played through it once or twice. Can you get a third playthrough? Fourth? Yes, we believe you can, with a little bit of help perhaps from us. So here is my conversation with them. All right, everybody, now I'm here with two giants in the industry, game designer extraordinaires, Dungeons and Dragons experts, role-playing game masters who are here to talk about Dragon Heist with me. Why don't we go around the table, tell me who you are and what you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games. Alex, let's start with you.
Okay, you're laying on a little bit thick there, geez. I'm Alex Klippinger. I've been a DMs Guild and kind of broader D&D creator for just over 2 years now. Got my start in the DMs Guild, and that's kind of where I've been. It's kind of been my sandbox for the last couple of years. So
you've created many great products, which we've talked about on this program. Last time you were on, we were talking about the Forgotten Realms Religion book that you put forth, which is a massive tome. People should check out that chat and that podcast. It was incredible. It's a great product. I'm happy to have you back on. You have created many awesome products since then as well. You are also, I would say, a champion of other creators on the Guild, which is something that I truly appreciate. I always see you talking about the work of others, which is really, really cool. And I learn about a lot of new creators thanks to the people you promote. So thanks for that. And of course, also with us, if we're going to talk about Dragon Heist, we have to have the one and only James Haeck. James, let people know, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Hey, James, thanks so much for having me on the show. It's been a little while, so I'm really happy to be back and talking with you. I'm James Haeck. I'm the lead writer for D&D Beyond, and I've also freelanced on a couple of Dungeons and Dragons books. James Introcaso and I wrote Waterdeep Dragon Heist together. We both worked on Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, and we also did this Guild Adepts thing called Dragon Heist Forgotten Tales, which I think is pretty great.
Yes, yeah, we worked on that with Will Doyle, and Rich Lescaflair did layout, and it pertains to what we're going to talk about today, and Alex also has a product that we're going to be talking about. I don't want to steal the thunder from you, Alex, but Dragon Swindle. Everybody get ready for Dragon Swindle. So I'm very excited. I've seen some art previews on Twitter, some covers that you've been tweeting out, Alex. Looks pretty cool. So before we dive in too much to the discussion, I do want to say we're going to be talking about the Wizards of the Coast hardcover adventure Waterdeep Dragon Heist. If you're playing through this right now, you may want to skip this podcast, come back to it when you have actually played through it or that kind of thing, because we'll likely be getting into some spoiler territory. However, it is kind of hard to get into spoiler territory with this adventure because there's a lot of different ways it can go. And that is one of the things we're talking about. Dragon Heist. Waterdeep Dragon Heist is a modular modular adventure. There's a lot of different parts, particularly it's chapter 4, Dragon Season, and then all of the layers in the back that can be mixed and matched to create a lot of different outcomes. And then the starting adventures also have a bunch of different ways they can go, particularly in chapter 2. We're looking at a lot of modularity there. And then there are some other parts of it where maybe there's not as much modularity. So if you have played through Dragon Heist, we're going to talk about how you can get more bang for your buck, play it over and over again, especially if you're using some of the supplements we're talking about today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Alex, you wanted to have this chat. What is it that you love about Waterdeep Dragon Heist?
So we're having this discussion about modularity, about how the different components of Dragon Heist can be swapped in and out. But the thing about D&D campaigns in general is that every campaign is modular. You know, DMs we're constantly picking and choosing. We're making little choices to change out components. There's always the joke of if you have stuff planned out for the east, north, and west on your map, and you don't have anything on the south, and your players want to go south, you just rotate the map, and suddenly now you have that becomes your new south. Every campaign does this, and every DM is constantly doing this. But what I really love about Dragon Heist is the way that it exposes that structure. Part of the way it presents itself is to show you the way in which you are engaging with this modular aspect more visibly than I think other hardcovers have done before. I think that by showing that, by kind of exposing that structure, it's kind of giving a lot of DMs a peek behind the curtain and kind of making them realize, oh yeah, we do this, don't we? And if I want to run this campaign, I can see the tools it's using. I can see the levers it's pulling and the dials it's turning. And that makes it, I think, easier for people to engage with it if they want to change out major components of the campaign, because it's set itself up to allow them to do that. And I think that's a really cool approach. It's different than what we've seen in a lot of the 5e stuff so far. So I think it's a great kind of an introduction for new or newer DMs to realize the kind of ways that they can mess around with structure as they're running a campaign.
Definitely. That's definitely true. And I know we talked a lot about new GMs and DMs when we were writing it, but I don't think I realized sort of the potential for teaching people about modularity and mixing and remixing adventures like that. Joey, how about you? You were in the thick of it, writing Waterdeep Dragon Heist. What do you love about Waterdeep Dragon Heist?
What I love about this adventure is it's connected to the modularity of it all, and it's the versatility of it. It's the broad appeal that this story has. We have heard in the past from Matt Mercer and other Wizards people that this adventure was originally just going to be a mystery involving Manchun, and that he was going to be the only villain. But when it became obvious that, once the mystery has been spoiled, the main thrust of the adventure kind of falls away, and that, the internet would spoil it instantaneously, making it obvious that there are 4 discrete villains going on, each with their own different flavor of villainy. This makes it a super broadly applicable adventure. I love Jarlaxle, because he's such a rakish anti-hero. I love the Xanathar because he has this very Star Wars-y Jabba the Hutt-y vibe to him. And, every one of the villains is that way, be they Jarlaxle or Xanathar or Castellanters or Manchun. And not only does it appeal to a lot of different people who have different tastes, I found that when I was playtesting this adventure, I just threw in all 4 villains, and whatever flavor I was feeling that week, I could refocus the adventure on them to do kind of a subtle genre shift that kept the game from ever stagnating.
I totally agree with that, right? I think one of the things watching Dice Camera action and seeing the way Chris Perkins sort of remixed all the villains in was really fascinating. And to see like, oh, okay, you could turn this into a much longer romp through Waterdeep if you wanted to. And you can bring in other threads, and character backstories are easy to integrate and that sort of thing. I really, really loved all of those aspects of the adventure. I love the multiple villains and that kind of thing. There were parts of it where I was like, I wish this part were just a little bit different to make life easier on the DM if they wanted to play through it. And granted, there are restrictions in place. I don't blame Wizards of the Coast. I think they did an awesome job. You can only have so many pages in a book, for instance, and that sort of thing before you have to start driving up the price and all yada yada. So I love it. I'm biased, obviously, but there are things like one of the things I really wished we could have had was like a few other options for maps for the Vault of Dragons, right? It's like, I wish we could describe more challenges and that kind of thing, because this is the end of the adventure for a lot of groups, and it's gonna be kind of the same thing. You'll know what to expect, that sort of thing, unless the DM goes in there and then does the work of changing the lair and that sort of thing, which is how Forgotten Tales came about. We identified some of those areas and thought like, let's make this infinitely more playable by adding more stuff. And so for a little extra, you get these extras.
Yeah, I was about to say you had a great idea as to how to fix that, because the beginning of the adventure, Chapter 1, and the end of the adventure, Chapter 4, are set in stone, no matter what you do. And not only that, but Chapter 1 was pretty restrictive as to what villain it highlighted. When I wrote that part of the adventure, I was still kind of under the impression that the Xanathar Zhentarim gang war was going to be a central part of the adventure, no matter what villain you picked. And so when I found out that it's basically only a big deal if you're playing one of those villains, I kind of smacked myself in the forehead. I was like, oh, darn it. And so when we did Forgotten Tales together, I thought, well, okay, I've got a Xanathar Zhentarim Chapter 1 in the actual book itself. Why don't we do a Bregendareth Castellanter intro for the other part? That way, no matter what you do, you've got one of the four villains involved in some way.
Yeah. And that was, I remember us talking about that, and it was like, hey, what do we think is going to happen here? And I remember talking about the gang war, and you said like, I'd actually, if we're going to make a new starting option, I don't want to focus on the gang war for all the reasons you just mentioned. So Dragon Swindle, Alex, tell me about Dragon Swindle, because that title is very enticing to me and suggests that there's going to be a double cross at least at some point. And you don't have to give away what you don't want to give away, but what does Dragon Swindle do with Dragon Heist?
Well, just like Dragon Heist is not really about a heist, Dragon Swindle is not really about a swindle. So the full title is Skullport Dragon Swindle. It's basically just think of it as like a component swap out for pretty much the entirety of the campaign. The structure is all still the same. You're still going to have your intro adventure. You're going to have the fireball. You're going to have the encounter chain, villain layers, all that stuff. But instead of being set in Waterdeep, it's just completely relocated to the city of Skullport. And in that process, in order to make that work, I changed out. There's 3 completely new villains with associated quote-unquote seasons, since Skullport's underground. They've got their own respective encounter chains. 2 of the encounter chain locations I actually replaced with new ones, because the ones they replaced just couldn't really make sense in a city like Skullport. And the player factions are almost all entirely different, because of course Skullport has its own history, its own factions vying for power within its streets, and so the kind of things like the Lord's Alliance and things just aren't present. So it definitely, I think, goes the full modular route where all of these different pieces are being replaced now, to try to create, as best I can, a new experience for the campaign while keeping the familiar structure that people recognize and will understand if they've read Dragon Heist.
I love that. So the idea, right, is like, hey, there's this whole city below Waterdeep, and now you're making Dragon Heist take place in that area. Is that what we're looking at?
Right, and like I said, the lore is pretty similar. It's just that in order to, I guess, to facilitate the changeover, some of those details, those background information things are changed. Instead of being, obviously, there's no Lord Neverember in Skullport, so instead it's actually a hoard of gold by Hallister that he purposely hid within the city, because who knows why he does anything? He's the Mad Mage, and just all these little bits and pieces that get changed out in order to just make the adventure kind of flow with the new location.
And that's really cool because that helps. It sounds like it further connects the story of Dragon Heist to the story of Dungeon of the Mad Mage as well, which, you know, they have this Waterdeep connection and the Yawning Portal in the hardcovers, but they're pretty separate aside from a couple of crossover characters and locations and things like that. This is a way to make it even more ingrained if you wanted to play with both of those books.
Right, and I do have some kind of little guidelines and things like that at the end, after, you know, they've presumably, the party has gotten the treasure, with a suggestion of, well, here's how you could segue this into Dungeon of the Mad Mage. And one of them is, if you wanted to, you could have them adventure onward, kind of continue the story threads that you started in this campaign, get them up to the appropriate level, because Skullport is on the 3rd level of Undermountain, and just say, okay, well, just adventure onward, get them to that level, and then give them the hook to bring them straight into the 3rd level. Or if you want to dive right into it, you know, have them go up to Waterdeep and access it through the Yawning Portal. You know, just trying to work with what I understand people will have continuing plot threads for a campaign, and trying to enable people to continue them as best they can.
That's really cool. Hey, Alex, I've got a question for you. I want to ask about what Skullport is like as a city, as a location in Dragonswindle.
Well, I was really excited for Dungeon of the Mad Mage because I've always thought Skullport was kind of a cool location. And not to rag on Dungeon of the Mad Mage, but I was kind of sad to see how empty Skullport was. There's so many locations that they mark on this gorgeous 3-level map, and you go to look at the location description, and it just says, this is the name of the location, and it's empty. There's no one there, which was heartbreaking. So that's actually one of the things that prompted me to start this project, was wanting to flesh out Skullport. So it is definitely a much more populated city than is presented in Dungeon of the Mad Mage. I went back to the old 2nd edition Skullport book, and I just kind of went through location by location and said, would this be a place that would still be open? If so, how has it changed? Because of course there's like a 100+ year gap between these editions in Forgotten Realms history. So it really was just going location by location, saying, well, how can I bring this into the modern time? How has it changed? Is it even still there? And I did the same thing with the available factions, and says, who is in power when this supplement was written? Now we know that the Xanathar Guild controls Skullport. So how has that changed the political landscape? What are these factions like now that they've lost power, and kind of how do they interact with one another? So I try to do that whenever I do an old to new edition, you know, Forgotten Realms guide or anything like that. So I ended up commissioning some really gorgeous black and white maps for Skullport from Aaron Harvey, who does really great cartography work, and just made this, I think, 7,500, 8,000 word guide that's going to be part of the Dragonswindle product, to help people. It's not just, you know, running a campaign, but to actually let them expand outward into all kinds of locations throughout all 3 levels of the city, and really try to make it feel like a living, breathing, and really dangerous place.
Yeah, I love that. Immediately changing the location to Skullport automatically makes Dragon Heist so you can suddenly play it again and everything is fresh. Like you said, you've got new factions. You've done a lot of the work of the fresh making for the DM. But even just switching locations like that is huge. Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a quick break to let you know that this episode of Tabletop Babble is brought to you by Kobold Press. Now, I know what you're thinking. Kobold Press, makers of many fine third-party products. But did you know they're also the makers of the Kobold Guides too? These are some of the best reading, will really change the way you play your game. There are guides to combat, game design, world building, how to be a game master, and more from professionals. You can check out the Any Winning Kobold guides, multiple Any Winning, over at koboldpress.com. There are so many awesome authors who have contributed: Keith Baker, Bruce Cordell, Wolfgang Bauer, Margaret Weiss, Shauna Germain, Monica Valentinelli, Rob Schwalb, so many more. There's a Kobold guide for almost every topic. You got magic, plots and campaigns, even board game design. This is an incredible value, every single one of these tomes, because they're chock full of advice. Find out more at koboldpress.com. Let's get back to the babble. What advice would you all have for DMs who have run this adventure and want to run it again with, the same group of players? How would you suggest they change it to keep it fresh and that kind of thing? Joey, let's start with you.
Fortunately, an adventure like this lends itself well to being freshened up, and especially with Forgotten Tales, not to keep, tooting our own horns about this, but the biggest inherent problem with Dragon Heist is that its beginning and ending is always the same. So finding ways to change that up is a great way to make it fresh. But beyond that, I would really highly recommend delving into older editions. If you feel confident enough in your DMing skills to adapt stuff from older editions to 5th edition, either, in your game prep or even on the fly, if you're really cool, going and looking at the absolute treasure trove of info that is in 2nd edition, even 3rd edition and 4th edition, is essential for coming up with ideas that players probably won't have heard of on Twitter or Reddit or YouTube by now, because no one's used them or popularized them for 20 years by this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are some great things about Dragon Heist that you can use, and there are great things if you look back. Exactly what you're saying. They especially going back to old supplements and things like that, but also going back in the history of big cities. What was New York like? What was London like? That kind of thing. There's good stuff there. What about you, Alex? What advice do you have for DMs who are going to run this second time, even if they are using a supplement or that kind of thing to help them change it? What should they be aware of? What should they change?
I think a really good idea is to throw some hard right angles at players. Hey, I'll toot your horn for you. Looking at Forgotten Tales, the new intro adventure, one of my favorite pieces is just this very little blurb where you say, oh yeah, and maybe they just kill Renaer Neverember. Maybe they just send his head home in a box. And it's literally in a little sidebar. That's a huge change. That's a massive change to the campaign. A lot of people running through it, especially for the first time, the DM is going to want these convenient ally NPCs. They want to have somebody on hands who can get the players out of a pinch, or who can be an information source when the players are stuck. And so if a group has run through this before and they're very familiar with this character, killing them off when if they mess something up, kind of giving this hint that there's less of a safety net, or that dramatic changes could be made, it's very impactful. And when people have played through it a second time, they're still carrying a lot of the same emotional attachment and a lot of the same friendliness or hostility that they had before. And so making those kinds of real, very serious changes, even very early on, is going to let people know that this experience is going to play out very differently. And I think that doing the same thing with the encounter chains, doing the same thing with the Vault of Dragons, maybe they show up and the villain has found a way to empty it out, or like you guys were talking about earlier, experienced DMs utilizing multiple villains at the same time, weaving more intrigue in with the factions and the various NPCs and groups around Waterdeep or wherever you're running the game. It's a way to engage players on another level, because if the players have played through this before, they're familiar with the beats, and I just think you should take advantage of that and say that, okay, you've gotten past the basic playthrough, now we can put even more into it, because they're going to have the advantage of being familiar with these characters and these locations. They're not learning it for the first time. So go to the next level of asking them to kind of access that knowledge and that emotional investment to make the game even better.
Having that conversation with your players is so important. And also, if you feel like you're falling into, I would say give yourself permission to quote unquote break the game, right? If you feel like, we've done a similar thing before, even though the characters are different, the backdrop is different, this feels very similar to exactly what happened last time. Surprise your players by, pulling the floor out from under them. All of a sudden, the Dragon Ward goes down and dragons start attacking Waterdeep, and oh my god, what's happening, right? Feel free to surprise yourself while you're playing the game, because then you will definitely surprise your players. So if you find yourself in a rut, I would have make a list of a couple cool events, things that can suddenly happen that could flip the game upside down. You don't need to know where they're going to go necessarily. Just let them surprise you in the moment and figure it out afterwards. So that's another thing people should do. Alex, this is kind of to the point you were just saying. Joey, what do you think players who are playing through Waterdeep Dragon Heist a second time should do? What advice would you have for them?
I would first want to think about under what circumstances they're replaying Dragon Heist. When you and I were writing this module with Chris Perkins, James, we were talking a little bit about groups might want to just replay it at some point, right? Like maybe you play Dragon Heist in 2017, and then you play another campaign, or you take a break for a while, and you think, I really want to come back to Waterdeep and play Dragon Heist again. You switch up your villain 2 years later, and you play it again. And the more I read about player reactions and stuff from this, or from people who've played it, the less I think that's a likely scenario. I think it's really vanishingly rare for a group to just decide they want to replay the module, especially when not only are there so many D&D hardcovers out, there's just so many adventures on the DM's Guild, and many of them are really, really good. So finding time to actually replay something with the same group and the same people is challenging. But if you're playing in Adventurers League, or if you were a player in Dragon Heist at one point and now you want to run it for another group of people, then I can see the issue of replayability coming into play. And it's the issue of a player playing in the campaign and then becoming a DM for a campaign that really gets my brain working, because it's not just enough for the DM to know the adventure and just kind of go through the numbers. If you're playing an RPG campaign, like you just said, James, it's really important for the dungeon master to be able to surprise themselves a little bit, to have that sort of joy of discovery. And usually that comes from the players doing something totally oddball, off the wall, weird, and the DM having to sort of scramble to improvise to pick up from that. But it can happen just from like knowing the basic structure of Dragon Heist and not reading too far ahead, and then being surprised and was like, oh, the Castle Lanterns are doing this? Oh my God. When, you played through Manchun's route the first time or something like that. That's the kind of replayability I'm really interested in. I hope someone who has replayed this module in that way or in a similar way listens to this podcast, because I really want them to like tweet at me about how that went. And the same could be said for someone who DM'd it on one path and is a player in another. That's maybe even more dangerous, more important, because if you've DM'd the module, you know how it's going to go, right? You've read the whole book, you've looked behind the scenes. Suddenly the surprise just isn't there for you. And so finding ways to shift it up by changing villains or by using Forgotten Tales or by using Dragon Swindle, that's when it becomes really useful to pull the wool over your pre-spoiled player's eyes.
Yes, definitely. I didn't even think about that, right? But there are definitely, probably for every adventure, there are GMs who run or who have read it because they're collectors and they buy the books and they want to read them and then end up being a player in somebody else's game. And you have to, be prepared for that kind of thing. That's why I like playing dumb characters, because then I'm like, well, his intelligence and wisdom are 6. So, and that's combined. That's the total. Not going to be able to help you out there. How about you, Alex? What advice, other than what you've already talked about, would you have for players?
Notify your DM that you have experience with the module. Again, session 0, pre-campaign stuff, those conversations are always incredibly important to set the stage. But in terms of just how you play, I think making a conscious effort to play a different style of character, to try to engage with the story in a way that you didn't before, will keep things more exciting for you. I guarantee in a table of 4 or 5 people, it's unlikely that all of them joined a faction or that they all joined different factions the first time you played this campaign. Engaging with factions more, trying to dive into your relationships with groups around Waterdeep or just that are kind of part of the structure of the campaign is a way to keep it fresh. That doesn't even, in a lot of cases, require a lot of work on the DM's part to accomplish, because a lot of those faction quests and those guidelines are already part of the hardcover, and so trying to engage with things that you haven't engaged with before is, I think, it's a pretty low bar for trying to keep it interesting, and encouraging other players at the table to do the same is going to engage the whole table in ways that maybe you didn't have before at a previous playthrough.
Talking is huge, right? Communication is just so big. Well, let's get into it a little bit, and I think it's okay to get into some spoilery territory. So once again, if you're going to play through one of these modules and you're not going to run them, I recommend stopping here.
Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. We'll catch you next week. But let's talk a little bit about some of the things we love about Dragon Swindle and about Forgotten Tales, because I think there's a lot there that we can talk about that is different to sort of excite and entice people. And we don't even need to necessarily get into spoiler heavy territory, but let's just entice people to play this adventure again, because I do think it's really great, and because we have a personal financial stake in it, and we're here to sell some stuff. For me, one of the things that I love about Forgotten Tales is, Alex, you alluded to earlier, there isn't really much of a heist in Dragon Heist. It's more like the general feel of everything. Will Doyle made it his mission to put an actual bank heist into Dragon Heist. And so that is one of the options for the new lairs for the Vault of Dragons is quite literally a bank in Waterdeep that has all of these magic rules and things like that. So that is one of the things that I love about Forgotten Tales. What about you, Joey? What do you love about Forgotten Tales that we've changed and put in there?
Oh man, I love being able to explore the character of certain NPCs in a different, alternative way. In Forgotten Tales, we get to have the players interact with the drow gunslinger Felrecht Lafine early in the story, rather than bumping into him later on in the narrative, if Jarlaxle is the main villain. I love Felrecht, I love the Brigandairth, and I love giving people the ability to get those characters into the story at an earlier point, if they feel as though Volo and Floon, those sweet fools, aren't lending too much to their story, they can give it a kick with other people who might take a more active role in the plot. And like, it's, I don't want to say this because like we wrote a lot of Dragon Heist together, but it's like, writing that was as if I were writing fan fiction for Dragon Heist, you know? I got to explore a different facet of who these NPCs are. And that felt fun and subversive, kind of. And I think that you'll get that fun, almost subversive fun by like using the product with the hardcover.
How about you, Alex? Tell us, entice us for Dragon Swindle.
I really had a kick with the new villains. That was just my favorite change up. Was trying to figure out what my villains were going to be, if I was going to base it in Skullport. And so I ended up with the Aboleth Scumlord, who features in the second edition supplement. The 14th Skull, who is this very weird character who just kind of gets mentioned as different characters throughout a couple of different editions, and ends up being basically an urban legend. I thought, well, that's perfect, you know. But I have to say my absolute favorite villain to write for and to include was Remalia Haventree. Making the Harpers into a villain for this version was a tickle. It was a lot of fun. Just basically, that's the option where if you're running this campaign, you say, you know what, I kind of want to just do an evil party. Just go ahead and make the Harpers the villain. It's fine. It'll be fun.
That's good stuff. I love that. I am very excited for this product. So let us proceed to, where can people find you on the internet, Alex?
One of the best places to find me is on Twitter at @AClippinger. I talk a lot of shop. I talk about upcoming products all the time. I love getting into the nitty gritty of RPG design. And if you are interested in my stuff, I'm on the DMs Guild.
Excellent. And where can people find you, Joey?
You can find me on D&D Beyond. I write articles for that website basically 3 days a week. I talk about, I give 101 guides to classes for new D&D players. I write an encounter of the week every Monday that you can use in your own game. Right now we're doing a series that leads up to Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus called The Road to Baldur's Gate, in which, you know, your group has just finished Dragon Heist. Let's grab some new level 1 characters. Let's have them do a road trip from the gates of Waterdeep all the way south down the Sword Coast to the very gate of Baldur's Gate. You can also find the work that James and I have done together or separately on the DMs Guild with the Guild Adepts.
Yes, absolutely. So check us out, and it's going to be a blast. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today on Tabletop Babble.
It's been so great, James. Thanks for having me on.
That was a great podcast. People, if you want to support the show financially, you should head on over to Patreon. That's right, patreon.com/Introcaso, INTROCASO, has all of your James Introcaso, that's me, needs covered. That's right, you want more content from me, you want to help decide the direction this show is going, you want to support the show, help it get made, head on over there. All kinds of rewards for this, and also you get to contribute to World Builder blog as well. And hey, if you already support the show, thank you so much for doing that on Patreon. I really, really appreciate it. But have you gone and left us a 5-star review on iTunes, Apple Podcasts? You know, because when you do, it helps other people find the show. It makes you a promoter. It takes 30 seconds of your time. It's free to create an account. And even if you're not using Apple Podcasts to listen, odds are your podcatcher app is using those iTunes algorithms to rate and recommend podcasts to others. So go leave us a 5-star review. If you do, I will read it out loud and credit the person who left it. You can make me say anything you want, like a second chapter from the United Kingdom, who left a review entitled Seriously Good Podcast. It reads, I recently discovered the podcast via means I can't remember, but I'm so happy I did. D&D/RPG player for 33-ish years and now organizing a games convention in Perth, Scotland. Oh my gosh, and that's at www.tabletopscotland.co.uk. It's going to be the 24th, 25th of August, 2019. Oh boy, we already missed it. I'm very sorry about this. Where we have 100 tables of RPGs in 5 slots over the weekend. A 50-50 split between D&D, Adventurers League, and other RPGs. Not bad for our second year. Anyway, shameless plug over. Yes, go listen. If you are in Perth, Scotland, or in travelable distance and have the means to get there, you should check this out because I bet they're going to do a third year. So go check it out. I've gone right back to the start and I've listened to many episodes, with my favorite so far being the writing and running one-shot adventures with MT, Merrick, Cindy, and Richard. The dynamic between the guests is fantastic, and you can hear how passionate they all are, including James, that's me, about this hobby. Keep doing what you're doing, James. It's great. Would love to see you host a panel or something at Gen Con 2020, as I'll be there for my 3rd trip. Cheers, Dave, at a second chapter at Tabletop Scott. Go check it out, and it's a numeral 2 ND chapter and at Tabletop Scott SCOT. So go check it out. Thank you so much, a second chapter, aka Dave, aka Tabletop Scott. I really, really appreciate it. All right, people, you can find all of the work that I'm doing over at worldbuilderblog.com and follow me on Twitter for amazing insights. Dare I say amazing? Well, they're probably just okay. But still, I'm on Twitter at James Introcaso. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget, RPGs are like sex.
Hey there, listeners. It's Shane.
And Ishan, your hosts from the Total Party Thrill podcast, the newest addition to the Don't Split the Podcast Network.
We talk topics that help you, dear listener, create and play better RPG games.
We have a back catalog of more than 150 weekly episodes.
And we got nominated for an Emmy for episode 11, Social Contracts.
In episode 154, we talked about crossing the moral event horizon. How evil is too evil?
We also recap our home games, like the 40k Rogue Trader campaign, Dynasty Unwarranted.
But that's mainly just you trying to kill us all. In your defense, our characters are greedy idiots.
Don't forget the 3 years we spent in Eberron playing Morning Glory, your 5th edition D&D campaign.
We also review new RPGs and books, and every episode we build a 5th edition D&D character in the Character Creation Forge.
You might check out the Pint-Sized Punisher from episode 119, a halfling with a bad attitude, and 14 levels of Barbarian.
So to recap, Total Party Thrill, RPG advice, campaign recaps, and D&D characters built by your dashing hosts every single week.
What more could you possibly want?
To get back to the actual show?
Oh yeah, let me just hit this button, and here you go.